What's up guys, it's Mars from Audio Judgment, and today I'm going to show you how to build a great pair of DIY speakers using just two power tools, a drill and a jigsaw. So this video is specifically designed for beginners. This means I'm going to use cheap drivers, and also I'm going to force myself to use as little power tools as possible. So even though I have a router to cut circles, I'm going to force myself to use a jigsaw instead. So let me show you the thought process of picking the speakers for this project. It's actually really simple. So I chose a brand which is an honest brand. It has decent prices from low to high. It's this Peerless by Timpani. So basically I'm gonna select the cheapest Peerless drivers, a mid-bass and a tweeter. So let's select by lowest price, and I'm going to pick a 6.5 inch driver. So this is the cheapest one, therefore this is the driver I pick. And let me open another tab and choose a tweeter, a Peerless tweeter, and check out the cheapest one. And this one is really small, so I'm not going to choose it. Next one seems fine. So it has 60 watts. The other one has 60 watts. I don't know. Amazing for the price. Superb build quality. Anyway, these reviews are irrelevant because I already bought them and listened to them. They're pretty good speakers for the price. And now to give you an idea of the total cost. So if I use sound imports for picking all of the items, I have a shopping cart over here, well, with all of the items that you need, and the total is 190 euros. I don't know if it's cheap or not, because inflation is through the roof these days. But anyway, my point was I'm going to pick the cheapest components. So it must be a budget build, even though it may or may not look like it. So this is the cost of the items, and you have to add to this cost the cost for MDF and for the paint or whatever finish you want to choose. If you go to my website, you will have detailed information about this project. So you have all of the panel dimensions in millimeters and in inches. You also have the parts list from Sound Imports and Parts Express. You have the crossover diagram and all the details you need to build this speaker. And also, since it's a beginner project, I'm going to guide you step by step through the building process. But before we go into the building process, I want to give my opinion about this speaker, because at the end I'm going to show you a sound demo. These speakers sound really good for the money. I mean, look at the frequency response. For such a simple crossover, it doesn't get any better than this. It goes down to 40 Hertz, and the roll-off is super smooth. For the kind of money you pay for this, I mean, it's a decent pair of speakers. Just a side note, because it goes so low, don't expect to have like ear bleeding levels. I mean, it will reach respectable volume levels without distortion, but don't have unreasonable expectations. I mean, if you think about for what it is, a budget speakers, you are surely going to be satisfied with these pair of speakers. And now let's get to the building part. Now the first thing you see me do is placing the panels on the table. I got them from a hardware store. You get the dimensions from my website and give it to the nice man over there and ask him to cut them to the correct sizes. Pay a small fee and everybody wins. Next up we are going to do the braces. Now this is not very complicated. Just draw a frame. The width is not important. I just use the width of my ruler and draw a rectangle. And then I use a 10mm bit, usually in a drill bit set. This is the largest ones. It needs to be sufficiently large for the jigsaw to fit through. So just drill 4 holes into the corners and then use the jigsaw to cut between those holes and make the braces. When you are done, you should have 6 pieces. So 6 braces. We have 3 braces per box. Next up, we are going to mark the spots where we are going to make the circle cutouts. And basically I'm using this thingamajiggy I bought from eBay. This is a ruler stopper, I think it's called. It's super convenient. You just place it at the right distance and then you use it as a stopper on the end of the panel and just mark that particular spot. So basically I'm marking the center of the circles, and then I'm using a circle drawing compass, and we are going to draw the circles for the port and for the mid-bass driver. For the tweeter is not needed because we are using a 50mm drill bit. Now ideally you want to use a slightly smaller one, maybe a 45mm, but if you do that you will have to make some small cutouts for the tweeter terminals because it won't fit in that small diameter. But as you will see, we will have problems later because the hole is slightly larger than ideal, but it's not a serious problem. Next up, we drill another 2 10mm holes to cut the 2 circles. Just make sure you don't drill exactly on the circle contour. You want to be like 55mm offset, so the end of the hole just touches the circle contour. Then you fit your jigsaw through that hole and cut. Try to follow the line and be careful because the circle is pretty small and you have to make adjustments all the way. It seems like you don't have to, but you really have to pay attention and make adjustments the whole way. You can see over here that in my first try, so for the first circle cutout, I did mess up a bit. If you had the audio of this video, you could hear me cursing in Romanian, but it's not a big deal. I think I sanded it down, and the flange of the speaker will cover the exterior of the hole, so it doesn't matter if you are off by a few millimeters, it will work just as good. Now you can see for the second hole I got a little bit more experience, so it went much more smoothly, so this hole turned out much better. And now for a quick test fit, the port fits perfectly. Next we are going to drill the holes for the binding posts and just get a 7mm drill bit and drill somewhere in the back. It's not important, just make sure they are not too close to one another because you will have problems when connecting to the crossover. After that, I'm going to draw the lines where the braces will be, because we are going to glue the panels in one single phase. So you need to know where the braces will go precisely. After all that is done, you have to glue where the panels go in contact with each other. So you can follow this video or you can figure it out for yourself. And then we simply puzzle the pieces together. The glue is sufficiently strong even when it's wet to hold the panels together and gives you sufficient time to bring your strap clamps. You just need 2 strap clamps. This only works when you have interior braces that touches all the panels, because we use the strap clamps in 8 corners, and since the panels are not already stuck together, it will force them in the correct place, and everything will be bound together except from top to bottom. So all the panels will be tightly fitted together except the top bottom part. And for that I'm using some clamps. That's why I elevated the box from the table, but instead you can just place the box directly on the table and use some heavy weights you place on the baffle, and it will press down. And with just 2 strap clamps you can finish the whole box, which is great. Now you can see me not using a power tool, just to demonstrate the fact that you could use sanding with a sanding block, but that will be really painful. So maybe the title is a semi-lie, not a complete lie, because I'm using 3 power tools, but you could use just 2 if you are motivated enough. But trust me, you need to sand this with an electrical sander, because otherwise it will be a lot of work. Next up, we are going to paint the box white. So I'm using some primer, some wood primer. Now wood primers are a lot of different types. I'm using the one where when it hardens it's like a chalky texture and it sands super easy. I like this one the most because it's easy to sand. Now you gotta mix it very well, so take your time when mixing a fresh can, and you must apply at least 2 coats. Now the way I do it is apply the primer on the top and bottom panel and leave it to dry, and then I place the speaker boxes on some standoffs, and then I paint the rest. Now the bottom panel is already painted and you can place it down, and I use the top panel to use my hand to keep the box in place, because it rocks when you use the roller on the speaker box. This is the way I do it. If you have a more efficient way, because you have to wait 1 day for the top and bottom panel to completely dry, and then another day for the rest of the speaker box. If you have an alternative method, I would gladly want to hear it. Now you do the same with the white paint, so at least 2 coats of primer and at least 2 coats of paint. Next up, we're doing the crossover. So the first thing you gotta do is just get yourself some pieces of wire and crimp. I like to crimp spade connectors for the speakers and ring connectors for where the binding posts will go. Now after you are finished crimping, I like to solder, so this is an extra step. Usually if the crimp does not make a good connection, this will ensure that you will have a proper connection when you apply the solder as well. Now I'm going to fast forward the crossover assembly. Basically I'm using a hot glue gun to fix the components to the board, but you can use zip ties as well, drill holes into the board and fix the components with zip ties. Just follow the circuit diagram, and as a tip, try to solder the components directly to one another and not use wire. So if you properly place the components, you can do that. Just I'm gonna skip to the end and show you the finished crossover, and you can just copy this layout because they are sufficiently close enough to one another that you can connect them directly and not use extra wire. Now, since this is a cheap mid-bass driver, you want to place some speaker gasket on the frame because it doesn't come with one. You can buy specially designed for speakers, but I think any gasket will do. Next up, you take a 3-inch precision port and just take the 2 flares and a connection ring, and that is all that you need. I'm using some PVC adhesive, and you want to use some adhesive to fix the components to one another because they might get unstuck or start rattling, and you don't want that. Now you see here when I'm drilling the holes, you can see me failing a bit on the tweeter side. That's what I told you, that 50 millimeters is a bit large for this tweeter. So you have to be really careful when where you are drilling the holes because you are very close to the edge. So this time I drilled slightly at an angle so I could fix that problem I just did, and it worked. But you have to be careful if you drill a 50 millimeter hole here. Next up, you just place the binding posts, tighten the nut from the inside, use a wrench, then place the crossover board and connect it to the binding post. Next up, I'm using some speaker damping to fill the lower chamber. Now I got a 1 kilogram bag and I'm using all of it. This is not something that's optional because I'm using damping and it will sound better. This is necessary because in floor standing speakers you will have some standing waves and you need to attenuate them. So don't skip this step, get the dampening material and fill the lower chamber with this. I don't know what this is, recycled something. It works very well. Next up, you want to fit the crossover board and just use some wood glue and fix it to the back panel. Here I also place a damping pad on the top panel. Now this is not mandatory, but I had it lying around and it does help, so I might as well place it over there. Now here I'm placing some silicone for the port. This is how I usually do it. If you put too much, it will ooze out, but you can clean it after it's hardened, no problem. So make sure you don't put too much. And this works very well with ports. You can use whatever material you see fit over here. Hey, look at my feet. All my toes are exposed. In Romanian we don't call them piggies, we call them potatoes. So there you have it, a full set of potatoes. Now all that is left to do is to put the port in, put the speakers in, connect the terminals and screw them to the box. Now, one tip I have for you here when you are working with cheap speakers like these ones, you have to be really careful when you connect the spade crimp connectors, because the connectors are very cheap and they easily bend and easily break, so make sure you take your time and don't force them in. Now this is the finished set of speakers. They turned out pretty well, and I'm sure everybody's gonna comment about my background with that ugly nest of wires over there, but hey, we are working over here, so I don't wanna see those comments. This is a working man space, so it's very adequate that it's not clean. Now I know you want to hear a speaker recording, and this is not the best setup to record speakers, especially with this Zoom recorder, but I'm just gonna do it anyway, and I'm gonna place the camera right in front of the woofer, so might as well have a slight show when you are hearing to this recording. So I'm gonna shut up and turn on the music.